wormholes, particle physics, extra dimensions. Are the wonders of so-called reality really what they appear to be? Or do we exist in an elaborate hologram? Is our universe the result of random activity or the result of intelligent design? If a creator was involved, can we discover him through our perception of divine order? This is Into the Multiverse with Josh Peck.
In the multiverse, no one can hear you scream. Welcome to Into the Multiverse. I am your host, Josh Peck, and with me in studio, my lovely, beautiful, wonderful, everything right in the world, fabulous guest, Michael Heiser.
That's pretty bad.
That's pretty rough. Well, my wife, Christina Peck, is co-hosting this episode, as in every episode. Yes. Of course, she is the wonderful one that I introduced.
Should say we just met.
Right,
so.
yeah.
But I couldn't resist.
Agree. He's wonderful, isn't he?
He is. You can't fault me for that. And, okay, so the cat is out of the bag. Our very first in-studio guest for Into the Multiverse, Dr. Michael Heiser. Mike,
Thanks
how are you doing?
Very good, thanks.
Oh, well, fantastic. And thank you for taking the time to do the show with us. Christina and I have been just thrilled about this, actually, since yesterday when we found out that we were going to actually do a multiverse episode with you. So that's great. Before we get started, there are a number of places you can find us online, and actually starting now, Into the Multiverse and all the other Skywatch TV shows are going to be having their own YouTube channels. That way it cuts down on some of the convolution in the normal Skywatch TV YouTube channel. So Christina will give you that information. And where can people find the show online?
Yeah, you can just go to our homepage on skywatchtv.com and follow the link from Into the Multiverse, and it will take you straight to our YouTube channel. If you have Roku, check us out on Roku under our Skywatch channel.
Yes, and make sure to subscribe. If you're already subscribed to Skywatch TV, that is awesome. Stay subscribed there, but also subscribe to our channel as well. All right, so cosmic geography is the topic of tonight's show. Fascinating topic, and I know you've done an extensive amount of research into this. I'm going to let Christina take the first question, though.
Oh, sure. For our audiences, just give us a little bit about yourself and how you started.
This will be prize-winning TV right here. Talking about myself. All right. Well, I am the scholar in residence at Logos Bible Software, which is a nice, lofty way of saying language geek. Okay. I do ancient language research there. We do digital products, databases, and things like that. So I've had a hand in a few of those kind of products. I've done some writing like reference content. I write for the magazine. We have something called Bible Study Magazine. We have something called Mobile Education, where we essentially have scholars in and they give us their sort of classroom content. So I've done 4 or 5 courses like that for my employer. But it's a number of different things. I came to Logos from graduate school. My academic background, and try to stay awake when you're listening to this. But my academic background is Hebrew and Semitics. I have a PhD in Hebrew Bible and Semitic languages, so that means I had to take classes in lots of dead languages, Hebrew, Aramaic, Ugaritic, all that sort of stuff. But my real orientation is biblical theology. I mean, to me, the languages are a means to an end. Doing better work in the text and not just memorizing stuff and doing translation, but it's actually there for interpretation. So I've taught a lot, taught 12, 15 years in the classroom before Logos and actually a little bit during, and also online for over 10 years in distance ed programs. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so you're definitely the guy to talk to when it comes to this stuff. And I know Christina and I have just been consuming everything we can find on YouTube and on your blog and podcast and everything for at least a couple years now.
Couple years.
We actually have a funny story. The birth of our son Nathan involves you a little bit.
I can't wait to hear that.
Well, I was doing a massive amount of research for my book, Cherubim Chariots, and part of what I wanted to put in there was some of your work from the Jewish Trinity aspect of, and So during that time, when I was doing all this research and everything, one day Christina went into labor with Nathan, and so we were at the hospital, and I had my laptop and everything with me.
And I had my laptop with me as well.
Yeah, and she had hers, and that's just kind of how we've always been. But we were waiting for the nurses to figure out when we were going to start, getting everything going.
Right.
So I thought, well, maybe this is a good time to get some more work done. So we turned, and she, and
Totally
Christina was
fine.
all on board with this. This wasn't just me being a jerk or anything, but so I was like, well, hey, do you mind if I put on one of Michael Heiser's?
I was like, sure, why not? We were playing.
So I put you into labor. Is that
I was in labor already. It just kind of
helped.
helped.
all right?
We were playing Words with Friends while I was
Yep.
in labor.
Okay.
Got my mind off of it, and I was listening to you.
Yep. But that was probably the third time. At that point, I'm sure I've watched it over 10 times now, but that's probably the third time at that point that I've sat down and watched the entire Jewish Trinity thing that you have on YouTube, which is something like 6 or 7 hours long in total. But it blew my mind. It still blows my mind. Absolutely fascinating stuff. But another area that you've gotten into a lot that Christina and I have been just thrilled with is Deuteronomy 32, because this is something that I was raised pretty traditional Baptist, and she was raised probably more Pentecostal, charismatic,
non-denominational,
kind of different ends of the spectrum.
Yes.
But this is something neither of us had ever heard because, well, for me, we weren't really King James only, but it was kind of King James preferred.
Sure.
Deuteronomy 32, there's, and I believe it's verse 8, has this interesting verse about something about the sons of Israel. And so for me, it was just easy to read over that and not even think about it. Well, then I found something of yours that totally demolished that and actually brings a lot of clarity to some of the more confusing scriptures that we look at, and actually defines the whole authority of cosmology in the Bible. What can you tell us about Deuteronomy 32:8, and why is that so pivotal and important in understanding cosmic geography?
Sure. Well, let's just start with English Bible translation. So for people who listen to that and get the impression of, oh, this is in some Bibles and not others, okay? What you're dealing with is in Deuteronomy 32:8, there's a textual problem, okay? There's a different reading depending on different manuscripts in the ancient world. Now, some translations like the ESV will actually read something to this effect. When the Most High divided up the nations, he divided them up according to the number of the sons of God. Verse 9 says, but Israel is Yahweh's portion. Jacob is his allotted inheritance. King James will have, when the Most High divided the nations, he divided them up according to the number of the sons of Israel. And, it's going to be fairly evenly divided. Now, what typically happens is, if you have an NIV or something like that, it'll say sons of Israel, or maybe like a study Bible edition of one of the newer King James, sons of Israel, but then it'll give you a little footnote and they'll say, hey, like in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it says sons of God. In the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, an ancient translation that Jesus and the apostles used, it'll say angels of God or sons of God. What the ESV has done, though, is incorporate the Dead Sea Scroll reading right into the translation. And that's why it says sons of God there. And again, I grew up kind of a similar context to yours. Our church, as a teenager, I became a Christian who preferred the King James, but it wasn't a doctrinaire, kind of thing. But it wasn't until, I hit grad school and you're sort of forced to, again, look at the original text, and they make you do things like textual criticism. And this is sort of a well-known example in the academic world. Very famous example because it's an example where it matters in terms of interpretation. So it gets a lot of attention. Well, I'd never seen it. But when I did, it's like, well, what's up with that? Because it's so different.
Yeah.
And there are other things in chapter 32 of Deuteronomy that are also different in the Dead Sea Scroll stuff. Toward the end of the chapter, you get another reference to divine beings that is not, again, in some Bibles that follow the traditional text. And so it sort of set me to wondering this. And that became, kind of, I'm known for doing divine council stuff, divine beings in the ancient world and that. But this passage is especially important because of the concept of cosmic geography. Because if you think about what's going on, okay, when the Most High divided up the nations, well, what's that a reference to? Well, that's Tower of Babel. That's pretty easy. We know who the Most High is. That's pretty easy. So when God scatters the nations, he fixes their boundaries, and we know that that's what's going on at Babel because the previous chapter, chapter 10, gives us the list of the nations that came out of the sons of Noah and all that. Well, whenever this happened, he divided them up according to the number of the sons of God. And as I began to investigate this, it's like I began to refer to this and think of it as the Romans 1 event of the Old Testament, that here we have a command, it's after the flood. I want you to scatter now. God repeats the Edenic mandate, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, all this stuff. And so what do? They do the opposite. They congregate at this place called Babylon, and they begin building this tower. And, scholars are agreed that this is probably a ziggurat. We have these in Mesopotamia all over the place. And if you look into what one of those is, it starts to take, a picture starts to form. A ziggurat was part of a temple complex. You built one to summon the deity to you. This becomes the home for the deity. So they want to settle here, build this thing so that Yahweh, the great God, Yahweh, the true God, will come here, and this will be the place where we meet with him. And that's what's going to make us famous, because this is the place where Yahweh comes and lives. And, and God's like, no, that really isn't what we had in mind here. And so he punishes them. He says, look, if you're not going to obey me, if you're not going to have me as your God and do what I say, I'm going to divorce you. I'm going to disinherit you. I'm going to sever the relationship between me and you. And I'm going to assign you, allot you, is the language in Deuteronomy 4:19. Deuteronomy 17, 1 through 3, Deuteronomy 25, 23, 26. They all refer back to this idea of other gods, other Elohim being allotted to the nations and the nations being allotted to them. This becomes the Old Testament explanation for why the other nations have other gods. Initially, it was God saying, look, I'm going to assign you, you don't want me to be your God? Fine. Okay, you can have these other guys as your gods, and they'll shepherd you and take care of you. And Paul refers to this event that this is going to lead people back to the true God. God says, I'm going to create Israel now to start over. Verse 9, Israel is Yahweh's portion. Jacob is his allotted inheritance. And that's what happens. Right after Babel, God calls Abraham, starts a new people. And they're the ones that God says to Abraham, right when he calls him, it's through you all the other nations, the ones I just disinherited, will be blessed. Hey, we're not going to forget about them, even though I've severed the relationship. We're not forgetting about them. I want you to be a kingdom of priests. What do priests do? They mediate between God and some other party. Okay, we're not going to forget the nations. We're going to bring them back into the fold, but I'm going to give them what they ask for a while, and we'll see how that works. Now we know from Psalm 82 and other episodes in Old Testament history, it doesn't work well.
Right.
The other gods rebel. They become hostile. They become adversarial to Yahweh. And all of this frames the entirety of the rest of the Old Testament. It's why after Babel and after Israel is created, it's Yahweh against the other gods, and it's Israel against the other nations. It's the whole Old Testament picture. And, for your listeners, you don't have to be a scholar or a textual critic to sort of get this. Think about what the other reading says. When he divides up the nations, he divides them up according to the number of the sons of Israel. Well, why would God divide up the nations at Babel according to the number of the sons of Israel?
Especially since Israel didn't
exist
Right.
yet.
Yeah.
And Israel's not listed in the table of nations in Genesis 10. So it's very obvious that the Dead Sea Scroll reading here is the correct reading. But it's one that you rarely get in your Bible unless you're reading the footnotes or unless you have a translation like the ESV. It's not the only one, but that actually has it in the running translation. But it really matters for understanding this sense of we need to be in this land in order to be in right relationship with Yahweh, because this is where he is, this is where he wants us. And everything's right in the world when we're where God has us to be, in this place. So like David, when he gets kicked out of Judah, and he's running from Saul, he winds up in Philistine territory. And he laments the situation by saying, how am I going to pray to Yahweh? How am I going to worship the Lord? And, it's not like David is denying omnipresence. Well, I guess God hit an invisible wall there or something. No, he has this sense that I need to be in Judah because that's Yahweh's domain. You know, you get all sorts of cosmic geographical episodes. Dagon. Okay, we all know the Sunday school story of Dagon. The Philistines capture the ark. They put him in the temple of Dagon, and Dagon winds up being a stump the next day. And we laugh, and it is kind of comical. I'll admit that. But there's this little throwaway line in the episode where after they figure out we need to get rid of this thing, this box, you know, send it back to where it came from. It says that the priests of Dagon refuse to this day to walk over the threshold where they found Dagon. Why?
Wow.
Because they have a sense that this little patch of ground here is under dominion.
Wow.
This is where Yahweh conquered Dagon. We're not going to take any chances. We're not going to walk over it.
Wow, that's amazing. When we come back, we're going to talk more about cosmic geography and what it might have to do with our day-to-day lives today. When we come back.
Coming exclusively from Skywatch TV for a very limited time starting May 31st, 2016. When you purchase the new book and final report from Tom Horn and Chris Putnam, The Final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Last Crusade, you'll receive the largest giveaway of 2016, an unprecedented value of over $200 in free books, DVDs, audio files, and a data DVD library with tens of thousands of pages of ancient literature no longer available, as well as movies, WikiLeaks files the government does not want you to see, and more for your library or to give away as gifts. Included in this biggest giveaway of 2016 are Chris Putnam's full-length DVD presentation, Astrobiology and the Vatican ET Connection, the new 5-part Skywatch TV special investigative report on the book, The Final Roman Emperor, plus 2 mystery books with a $40 value, and a data DVD library with thousands of pages of ancient literature, movies, and audio series for your library or to give away as gifts. And for the first several thousand customers while supplies last, you'll also receive Satan's Dirty Little Secret, the 2 demon spirits that all demons get their strength from. Satan, You Can't Have My Promises, the spiritual warfare guide to reclaim what's yours. What Happens When I Die, true stories of the afterlife and what they tell us about eternity. Becoming a Prayer Warrior, a guide to effective and powerful prayer. An unprecedented value of over $200 in never-before-offered free products. And the biggest giveaway of 2016, yours absolutely free when you purchase The Final Roman Emperor from skywatchtv.com for only $19.95 plus shipping, beginning May 31st. But be advised, this astonishing promotion is limited to first come, first serve while supplies last. So it's urgent, beginning May 31st, 2016. You place your order for the final book and biggest prediction yet in this 4-year investigation by internationally acclaimed best-selling authors Tom Horn and Chris Putnam. The Final Roman Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Last Crusade for only $19.95 plus shipping. This offer is on a limited time basis and will end without notification. So be sure to visit skywatchtv.com to follow the updates in the countdown to the biggest giveaway of 2016. Order the new book by Tom Horn and Chris Putnam on May 31st to receive the unprecedented value of over $200 while supplies last. Free products limited to quantity on hand and may be replaced by products of equal value.
And we are back with Dr. Michael Heiser in studio with Christina and I for Into the Multiverse, talking about cosmic geography. Christina, I know you had a question that you wanted to ask.
I know in certain accounts are, that spirits would have dominion over certain countries or even cities today. People going into certain parts of cities, you can tell that there's more of a darkness there. Do you believe that that these entities are still in charge over these countries today?
Yeah, I still believe that the concept of cosmic geography is a biblical one. It is a true one. We can't necessarily parse what the relationship is between geographical areas that are outside the biblical orbit, so to speak. That because to them the ancient world was just what's described in Genesis 10. This is the world they knew about. We live in different parts of the world again, but I think the concept is the same because you get things like the Great Commission, Paul talking about the fullness of the Gentiles and regathering the nations back into the people of God. Well, people everywhere are legitimate candidates for the people of God because of the gospel and whatnot. So to me, when I get that question, the way I respond to it is we need to answer yes to that because we need to take Paul seriously.
Right.
This is where Paul gets his theology of principalities and powers. If you look at Paul's terminology, principalities, dominions, powers, thrones, authorities, rulers, these terms in Greek all have one thing in common. They are all used both in the New Testament and outside the New Testament for geographical dominion or geographical rulership. Mm-hmm. And so when Paul's describing principalities and powers, he's not referring to, again, for lack of a better way to put it, sort of underling demons. Mm-hmm. Demons are a different thing. They hate the same things as these guys do, and they have a common enemy. But in biblical theology, the powers over the nations are not them. They're something different, and they're something that outrank, a normal demon, if you can use that parlance. But for Paul, it's like, look, we know when we go into places, we know what the task really is. It's not, hey, I might run into somebody who's possessed and I got to cast this thing out. They know that this place, that there's an entity or entities attached to this place that think of it as something they own, mm-hmm. and something they rightfully own, and something they want to keep. And so as the kingdom, this is why you get the kingdom of God cast the way it is in the New Testament. It's one kingdom against another. As the kingdom advances and infiltrates all parts of the world, the dominion of these other entities, their control, shrinks. Mm-hmm. It's a symbiotic relationship here. It's the spiritual warfare idea. This is where it actually comes from, in terms of something academic, biblical theology.
That's really amazing, and especially the spiritual warfare aspect, because that's not something that we usually hear in church a whole lot nowadays.
No, not anymore.
How should the average Christian at home who might be hearing this for the first time, how should they be using this information, or essentially they might be thinking, why should I care? How would you respond to that?
To me, I tell people that it ought to get you to think better as a Christian about two things. One is your status, how God looks at you, mm-hmm. and your destiny. So you take the cosmic geographical worldview idea. Again, in biblical theology, the nations are owned, they're under dominion by other powers, and the kingdom of God is assaulting those powers, and you're part of that kingdom. Mm-hmm. Well, that whole worldview is why, when you get to the book of Revelation, Jesus, again, in a crazy passage in Revelation 2, Jesus quotes a messianic psalm and applies it to you and to me, and says, to him that overcomes, I will put him over the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron.
Wow.
So in Revelation 3, behold, I stand at the door. Now, everybody knows that part of it, mm-hmm. but it's the same thing. I will give to him the morning star. And he says later in Revelation, I am the son of David, the bright and morning star. In other words, the sons of God who presently have become corrupt, they're in rebellion, and they dominate the nations and enslave the nations and try to keep them from the kingdom of God, from the gospel. They will be displaced and replaced by the sons of God, which are us. Mm-hmm. This is your destiny. God doesn't look at you as like, oh, you're going to get to heaven someday and start playing harps and floating around and be disembodied. No, it's there's going to be a new earth, and you are going to replace them, which is why Paul says in 1 Corinthians 6, when he's trying to convince the Corinthians, we quit taking each other to court and suing each other over this crazy stuff. And he says, don't you know that you're going to judge angels? Don't you know that you're going to, judge the nations? Don't you get it? And apparently they didn't get it. Mm-hmm. So Christians, we are the new sons of God. We are the new, upper tier members of the divine council.
Wow.
And in our glorification, in the new earth, when the eschaton comes and is finally consummated, we displace them and replace them in a global Eden. So again, I hate sermons about heaven. I really almost can't sit through them anymore, because it's this ethereal, after the 10,000th verse of just as I am, I just want to leave. I don't want to hear it again.
Yep.
But this is how it's cast. Like it's this mindless set of mantras or something with people floating around or what. Look, it is, you get to experience and participate in. You get to maintain and experience what Eden was supposed to be on a global scale.
Wow.
Okay, that is how God looks at you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the destiny God has in mind. And he's telegraphed that thing from the Old Testament through the New Testament, but we just don't get a lot of it because we're kind of missing the framework for a lot of the language.
Wow, praise
That is
God.
amazing.
That's amazing.
I know. Well, I know you have a new book coming out. Can you tell us a little bit about
Is
that?
this the new one?
The new
The
one.
new one with about a minute left.
Yeah, the
but-
new secret one. I'm working. We have a tentative title, so I don't want to give it the tentative title because, Tom might change it.
Sure.
But it's a book on how the story of the sin of the Watchers, again, the Enochian version, the book comes from Enoch and other texts like Enoch, about the sons of God, the daughters of men, and all that. So the story of the sin of the Watchers and how that is the backstory for a number of passages in the New Testament. Not the Old, but the New Testament. So it's something that, again, if you kind of know what you're looking at and what you're looking for, there are some strange passages in the New Testament that if you kind of look at them through this lens, they just make sense. So I want to do a whole book on all those passages where it makes a difference.
Wow,
awesome.
I'm excited about
That's
that.
really exciting,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's fun.
For the audience at home, where can they find you online if they want to find out more, read your blog, listen to your podcast? Where can they go?
Well, the Nerve Center is drmsh.com, which is so clever. DR as in doctor, MSH, my initials, drmsh.com.
Where did you think of that?
Yeah, I know. It's just a stroke of genius. But if you go there, you'll find gateways to all the blogs, links to everything like that. The books, Facade, Portent, The Unseen Realm. Basically anything I do, you can find a link to it there or a menu item there. So that's what I recommend.
Great. And I highly recommend, I know Christina does too,
Yes.
all of Dr. Michael Heiser's work. So make sure to check that out. Also, if you want more episodes of Into the Multiverse, go to skywatchtv.com. You can find it linked there. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, there should be a little subscribe button on the lower right-hand corner of the screen. Go ahead and click that and subscribe to our channel. As I said before, it's a separate channel. Into the Multiverse has its own YouTube channel now, as will all the other Skywatch shows such as Skywatch Women, Sci Friday, everything that Skywatch does. So make sure to do that. If you have any questions or suggestions for the show, you can email me at jpeck@skywatchtv.com. Mike, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks
and
for having me.
Yeah, I know we're going to do another episode, so we should conclude this one so we can start that one right away, because this is just mind-blowing stuff. So for my lovely, beautiful wife, Christina Peck, and for Mike Heiser, I want to thank you for watching. Take care, and God bless.